Good evening, everyone. From today, this discourse on Raja Yoga is being started. So it will be a series of lectures on alternate Fridays, every alternate Friday. So this Friday, it will be the first class. Today is the first class, and then the next Friday. So every alternate week, it will be Raja Yoga and then Karma Yoga. So Raja Yoga lectures will be given by Swami Chidekananda ji Maharaj. Chidekananda ji Maharaj, we also call him a Big Boss Maharaj. So he used to come here at IIT Kharagpur when we used to have classes here. And then Maharaj is starting this Raja Yoga class from today. And Maharaj is at Advaita Ashram at Kolkata with Ramakrishna Modern Mission, and he's the CT editor of Prabhuddha Bharat. And any other introduction of Maharaj, I request Maharaj himself to give any other introduction he likes to give about himself, and then start the topic. Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. And
Yeah.
namaste, everybody. Nice to see you all, and nice to see many familiar faces from IIT Kharagpur, and and I'm really excited about this class on Raja Yoga, Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, and let me begin with a chant, and then we'll begin. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Okay, so we're beginning this class on Raja Yoga, and this is by Swami Vivekananda. And actually, before we begin, when we begin any text, any scriptural text, we can always go to and by the way, Sujoy, am I heard? Is it? Can you hear me?
Your audio is completely clear.
Okay,
You
very good.
just
Thank
have
you.
to make a full screen of your
Okay,
presentation.
okay, F5. Okay, okay,
Yes.
okay. So, Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga is especially very practical in our current situation. It's very practical, and I think that I hope that in this class it will be something that will be very useful to help us manage our mind and our emotions, which is very essential in this present time, in these present times. So now let's begin that. I don't know how many of you have studied Vedanta Sara, but in Vedanta Sara, they say that for any scriptural text, there will be four different Chatushta Anubandha Chatushtaya. So there will be four different requirements to study any text. And we should be clear about each of these requirements. The first one is adhikari, meaning competent student, eligible to study the text. The next one is vishayaha, subject matter. The third is prayojana, the purpose, necessity. And the fourth, sambandha, the relationship between the subject matter and the goal. So in Vedanta Sara, they have like a very elaborate requirements to study the text. What is it? Viveka Vairagya, Shat Sampati, Mukshutva. So Viveka, renunciation, discrimination, the sixfold treasures, and the final one is yearning for liberation, Mumukshutva. Now, for us that are tuning in today, Sri Ramakrishna, if I'm sure many of you have read the Gospel or the Kathamrita, he had a different interpretation. He said the main requirement is vyakulata, yearning, spiritual yearning to realize God, which is the same as mumukshutva. And so adhikari, that's the main requirement for that. If we have that vyakulata to want to achieve the goal. Vishaya, in this case, the subject matter is meditation. The subject matter is meditation. The sense of meditation. Prayojana, purpose or necessity. So in Raja Yoga or the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, the ultimate goal they say is Kaibalyam, or the separation of Purusha from Prakriti. But there are also intermediate goals. Intermediate goals, I think they talk about Pratik Chetana, which is one's realization, the separation from the Jivatman, from the mind-body complex. But I would like to even propose further intermediary goals, such as what we talked about, managing our mind and emotions, getting to know our thoughts better, getting to know, increasing our ability to have accurate self-awareness and accurate self-assessment, being able to apply our intellect in a better way so that we are not controlled by our circumstances, that we can be calm even in the midst of turbulent circumstances. And sambandha is the relationship between the subject matter and the goal. And that's what the text will reveal. Now, I would like to do something a little bit different. The approach we're going to take is something Sri Ramakrishna, if you read the Kautamrita or the Gospel, he used to employ this. It was the interactive approach for imparting the highest spiritual truths. Dr. Radhakrishnan called this the progressive discovery of truth. In the Nyaya Shastras, they call this Vada. There's three types of discourse, debate in the Nyaya Shastras, at least three types. One is Jalpa, which is just arguing for the sake of arguing. Vitanda, you don't even have a point to make in Vitanda. You're just trying to destroy the other person's argument. And Vada. Vada is seeking truth. So from both sides, the person who's giving and the person who's receiving, is seeking the truth. This was the approach Sri Ramakrishna would apply. And one example of this, the reason why I bring this up is because lots of times we see in churches, mosques, temples, people apply something like a top-down approach. Like somebody stays on the top of a pulpit and they preach to the audience. We call that top-down heavy. But Sri Ramakrishna and also Swamiji, they had a different approach, even when imparting these spiritual truths. For example, in the Kautamrita, during their Sri Ramakrishna's second meeting with Master Mahashai, he didn't preach to him what God is. What did he do? He asked the question, Acha, tomar shakare vishwash na nirakare? Do you have faith in God with form or without form? So he's asking him. So it's not a lecture. It's actually give and take, question answer, a dialogue. Later on, after Master Mahashai had several meetings with him, he asked him, "Tumi amake ki bhabe bujhte paro?" What do you think of me? And what is he testing of Master Mahashai here? What do you think of? What is his conception of God? So my approach actually for this class, I learned this from my brother is giving this Vedanta Life Academy. So he gives assignments to do ahead of time, readings to do ahead of time. So I kindly request, if possible, the assignments will not be very long, but you please read the assignments, and I'll also put questions there too. And please think about the questions. One other thing, this approach of Sri Ramakrishna's can be also called Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. What do I mean by that? Shravana, especially with Master Mahashai, we see this. Shravana. What does Shravana mean? Listening. to receive the information without bias. So the first point is, did I receive the information? What was the information, and did I receive it? So Sri Ramakrishna with Master Mahoshai, after they would have a conversation, and after Sri Ramakrishna would say some things, he would then afterwards say, Ami ki bolo, ki bolam. So you please repeat what I said. And if Master Mahoshai would repeat it, and if he was wrong in any area, Sri Ramakrishna would correct him. No, that's not what I said. This is what I said. So the first stage is receiving the information, what was said. So what did Swamiji write about? What was said? What did he say? The second is manana. That is, okay, I received the information, but I still don't get it. So that's what this class is about, manana. That we're discussing this, we're trying to get further clarity. Then this third stage, nididhyasana. Okay, so I received the information, and now I get it. So the third part, I want to make it my own, and I want to manifest it in my life. Can you all see this date right here?
Yes.
Okay, so 1896. So the history of Raja Yoga, Swami Vivekananda came to the West in 1893. And he started the Vedanta Society of New York, which actually our Swami Sarva Priyananda is now the head of. And during that time, he gave lectures, and he on the 4 different yogas: Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Raja Yoga. So what's interesting about this Raja Yoga text, because it's probably been the most influential book on yoga and meditation in the 20th century. It influenced so many people, including this Paramahansa Yogananda and many others. So this text is broken up into 2 parts. The first part was a talk of 7 or 8 lectures given by Swami Vivekananda to a Western audience in New York. And it was a free discourse he gave on Raja Yoga. He was not confined to any text. And what we talk about, it's a combination not only of Raja Yoga, but also of Advaita Vedanta and also Tantra. And the insights that he gave in those first 7 or 8 lectures, which we will study, and the scientific way in which he presented it, you can say that this is his unique contribution to Indian philosophy, and also his unique contribution to the field of psychology, both these areas. Now, I have a picture here you can all see of Sarah Ellen Waldo. This is a book we sell at Advaita Ashram, The Inspired Life of Sarah Ellen Waldo. She was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda. So the first 7 or 8 lectures that we are going to read, which forms the first part of Raja Yoga, that is, like I said, that's the first part. The second part is his commentary on the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which is the official, usually the text that we refer to when we talk about the yoga philosophy. And we'll get into that later on. We'll give the background of the yoga philosophy later on. But so there are many commentaries on the Yoga Sutras written by Patanjali. And Swami Vivekananda gave his own commentary. And the thing about this commentary, and why we are especially indebted to Sarah Ellen Waldo, they said she used to, at that time, they didn't have pens. They had those, I think, ink pens, right? So you have the pen dipped in ink. So it was like Vyasa dictating the Mahabharata to Ganesha. Remember the requirement. Ganesha said he was the scribe, but he told Vyasa that I'll write down the Mahabharata on the condition that you not stop at all during the entire talk. You have to keep talking. Actually, in the case of Swami Vivekananda, according to Sarah Ellen Waldo, because he was translating from Sanskrit into English, sometimes even for 20 minutes he would ponder the English equivalent for this Sanskrit word. And then suddenly he would just burst into a flurry of insights. So maybe for 20 minutes she's not doing anything, but she has to stay ever vigilant and ready, because when he starts, it'll be like an avalanche, and she has to capture every single word. So now let's get to I gave everybody an assignment for the first class, and that was the epigraph of Raja Yoga. So this is the can everybody see the screen right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just read it one time. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divine within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy. By one or more or all of these and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. Okay, so this is a very profound, and today we're gonna take the time to dissect this, because each word is very profound. And again, it's not just what I'm saying. All of you should also think about it. What did Swamiji mean here? What did he mean? So let's start with the first part. Each soul is potentially divine. Okay. So now there's two ways of looking at this, actually. Advaita Vedanta, they might say that Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi. I am Brahman, you are that. So why do we say potentially divine? So one reply to that would be that yes, even from the highest standpoint, the Paramarthika Satyam, the highest level of reality in Advaita Vedanta, each soul is divine. But from the Bhavaharika, or the empirical reality, we're all potentially divine, and we have ajnana, or ignorance. So our goal is to remove that ignorance and then become one with the Paramatman. So that's one interpretation. Another interpretation would be that in Raja Yoga, and let's go to the next slide for this. This was from the Sutras 11.25. So I went to that sutra, and right before this epigraph, what did Swamiji talk about? So he said, according to yoga philosophy, it is through ignorance that the soul has been joined with nature. The aim is to get rid of nature's control over us. That is the goal of all religions. Each soul is potentially divine. So that's another way to look at it, that in the yoga philosophy, it's a little bit different from Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. We have Purusha and Prakriti, and our goal is to separate Purusha from Prakriti. So the other interpretation is that this is exclusive to the yoga philosophy. But as Swami Rupananda recently put it, in recent times, all these the six darshanas, everything's kind of merged together. So we don't really worry so much about the distinctions between yoga, Vedanta, Sankhya. It's true there are some differences, but our focus is not on the philosophical difference. Our main goal is how to put these things into practice. So anyways, these are two different interpretations. He was potentially divine. But anyways, in any school you look at, Bhakti school, Advaita, Raja Yoga, the goal is that we're the Jivatman and we're trying to realize our true nature. The goal is, the next line, the goal is to manifest this divine within by controlling nature, external and internal. So just one thing I wanted to say about manifest. It's a really interesting point Swamiji makes here. Because I raised this point that I have not seen in any other Acharya, whether it's Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, they talk about manifestation. In traditional Advaita Vedanta, they talk about realizing yourself, realizing your true nature. Okay? Atmani eva atmana tushtaha. So the realized soul finds joy in himself. But one of Swamiji's unique contributions was, it's not just enough to realize. Just like the motto of the Ramakrishna Mountain Mission, Atmano Muktartam Jagat Hitaya Cha. So for one's own liberation and for the welfare of the world. So this idea of manifest is a very interesting word. I looked it up in the dictionary to show what's within. So this is a very interesting word, and we see a lot of language used by Swamiji regarding this. For example, if the fisherman thinks that he is the spirit, he will be a better fisherman. If the student thinks he is the spirit, he will be a better student. If the lawyer thinks that he is the spirit, he will be a better lawyer. So we're asking, what's the practicality of Advaita Vedanta of yoga? So Swamiji very much emphasized this. Realize and also manifest. And again, right below that, my ideal can be put into a few words, and that is to preach unto mankind their divinity and how to make it manifest in every moment of life. And that's what we really want, right? We want to become better people. We want to manifest it. We want to have more strength when dealing in the world. And this, I've given this idea of manifest from the different Advaitic schools. I just also wanted to give one quote from the Bhakti school. He told Sharat Chandra Chakraborty, who knows which of you will have the lion roused up in him and when? If in a single one amongst you, mother rouses the fire, there will be hundreds of feeding homes like that. The thing is that knowledge and devotion, everything exists in the fullest measure in all beings. Manifesting. And why that's also one other point regarding manifesting. Swamiji talks about this word a lot because he also found that in India as well as in the West, we're not manifesting most of the time. We're trying to show. I think he said in one place, normal people, we spend 99% of our energy trying to show something that we're not, and less than 1% trying to become. So now let's go to the next one. By controlling nature, does anyone want to add anything to the word manifest? Okay. By controlling nature, external and internal. So regarding nature, external and internal. So what do you think he meant by external? External nature means what? So we can say that, again, say someone's involved trying to improve the environment. So the nature is, they're trying to change the external nature to help the world, to help society. So this would be something external. Another interpretation might be that there's like an external stimulus, like maybe addictions, maybe something from the outside, like the internet, food, mobile phone, smoking, and it's we can't control ourselves. So how to control, how to not allow us to get affected by these external devices. So we have, and internal. So internal in Vedanta Sara, we talk about to control our reactions internally and externally. So do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more of all of these, and be free. So this is also like almost like philosophically, this is a unique statement made by Swamiji. So do this by either work, karma yoga, or worship, bhakti yoga, psychic control, raja yoga, or philosophy, jnana yoga, by one or more of all of these, and be free. So that's significant because, for example, what does Shankaracharya say? In the Advaitic tradition, we first engage in karma kanda, and which gives purification, and then we engage in rituals, bhakti, that leads to chitta shuddhi, and then after that we engage in jnana yoga, the jnana marga, shravana manana didhyasana. And same thing Ramanujacharya, he says that start with karma yoga, that leads to jnana yoga, then you have the experience of atma avalokanam, and then you can go into bhakti yoga. But no, Swamiji is saying do any of these or a combination of all. So why is that significant? It's a unique contribution to Indian philosophy. And any of you wonder why is it so significant? Well, the reason it's significant is because spiritual practice is not one size fits all. We each have our own nature, and we each have to grow in our own way. And there's not just one way to do things. So we have to figure out what our predominant tendency is. And Swamiji would always emphasize this, and grow along the lines of least resistance. A combination of all the 4 yogas, but we have an inclination towards one of the yogas. That will usually be the case. And we'll talk about how Swamiji applies this in his monastic organization, as well as to his disciples. So let's go to the next line. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals, or books or temples or forms, are but secondary details. Again, I think this is quite obvious, but unfortunately, in all religions, we probably put more emphasis on these things: doctrines, dogmas, rituals. Not that these things are bad. These things are very helpful for us in our spiritual life. But the main thing to know ourselves, to know our nature. So sometimes we lose track of that. So anyways, going back to this line, do this either by work or worship. So this was significant for 2 reasons in Indian philosophy. First was that Swamiji is the first one to say that each of these karma yoga, actually Swamiji here reiterates what Sri Krishna said in the Gita. Karma yoga itself is a valid path to realization. He gives emphasis to that. And also, any of these paths, whatever you want to say, any of these paths will take you to the highest goal. Just do it sincerely. Secondly, by one or more of or all of these. Swami Bhajanji, one of our senior monks and acharyas in Belur, he said this was really the crest jewel of Swamiji's unique contribution in Indian philosophy, the synthesis of all the yogas. And this is actually what we practice today. And I'll show how. The next question is, how does Swamiji put this into practice in his monastic organization? Okay. So we now have here, this is the, can you all see this? Someone say hello.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, this is the official Ramakrishna emblem of the Ramakrishna Mountain Mission. And let's see what Swamiji talks about here. The wavy waters in the picture are symbolic of karma, the lotus of bhakti, and the rising sun of jnana. The encircling serpent is indicative of Raja Yoga and the awakened Kundalini Shakti, while the swan in the picture stands for Paramatman. So this is the swan, Paramatman. This is the supreme, our supreme self. And so we see these wavy waters, karma. This represents the waters of the world, the ups and downs. Life is never smooth, right? And it's never steady. We always have to continue to struggle. This is the wavy waters of karma. Then the next one below is this is the lotus. So this Sri Ramakrishna says in the Katamrita that when we have some type of insight, when we have that communion with God, then the lotus of the heart opens up. And we experience that oneness with God at the personal level. Then here again we have the sun of knowledge. So that's pretty obvious, the sun of knowledge. When the sun of knowledge comes, then in Advaita Vedanta, what happens? All knowledge gets destroyed. And the final one here, the serpent, it represents the Kundalini Shakti, which is the goal actually in Raja Yoga to awaken this Kundalini Shakti. So these are the synthesis of all the yogas. And this is what Swamiji, this is what he talked about, and this is what we practice in our monastic organization, all of our monks. So we do this. We usually have a predominance, we do mostly karma yoga, but a harmony of all the 4 yogas. Part of the day in our routine, we go for meditation, part of the day for studies, most of the day in work. And we have arati in most of our centers. And so the bhakti that we try to develop towards Sri Ramakrishna. So it's a combination of all 4. And this is something that we can all strive for, to be more balanced in our life. Another thing I just wanted to say, this was a nice point brought up by one senior monk, that Raja Yoga and Karma Yoga, they're what you call process-oriented. And I'll explain. Whereas Jnana Yoga and Bhakti are goal-oriented. In both Jnana Yoga as well as Bhakti Yoga, we're seeking to know the nature of the ultimate, of God. In Jnana Yoga, we're seeking to know the nature, who am I? What is this Atman within me? And in Bhakti Yoga, what is God? What is his nature? But in both Raja Yoga as well as Karma Yoga, and we're going to read about this, study this, belief in a God is not required. In fact, in the Sankhya philosophy, as well as the Yoga philosophy, the idea of God, Saguna Brahman, with these powers of Srishti, Sthiti, Vinashini, creation, preservation, and destruction, is not held. In Sankhya Yoga and Raja Yoga, God is seen as like Indra, a temporary being in charge of creation, or as a first in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, he is as a first teacher. Okay, so what that means is that you might be, say, more of a Jnana Yoga or a Bhakti Yoga. You can use these in your practice. You can use. In fact, you'll see in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras that there are verses that talk about Bhakti, and there are verses that talk about Jnana. So these can be used in case you're not like a meditator, but your inclination is more towards the path of knowledge or the path of devotion. This can be used to help you in your practice. Okay. Let me just conclude by talking about Swami Vivekananda, what he did, his training of Sister Nivedita, because we're talking about how did he apply this in his life. We talked about how this idea of manifestation, which is an important part, how he applied this idea of manifestation and the synthesis of all the yogas. We talked about how he applied that to his monastic organization. But then one other example is how he applied that to Sister Nivedita in his teaching of Sister Nivedita, who's pictured right here. And I wrote some articles about this. But basically, she was an Irish lady who had come to India in I believe the year 1897. And Swamiji took her to Amarnath, and before that he gave her a lot of training. So he saw within her nature. In fact, one thing a spiritual teacher can do, they can guide us. What is our path of what is our path? What is our tendency towards? So Sri Ramakrishna said that there were two types in the Gospel: the Vishnu type, which is the Bhakta, and the Shiva type, the Jnani, the person of knowledge. So for Sister Nivedita, Swamiji saw she was a person, even though she had a great deal of bhakti, but her predominant inclination was towards knowledge. So he gave her the training in that way. And later on, you see how she manifested herself, and he trained her in the synthesis of all these yogas. And later on, she transformed herself from Margaret Noble to Sister Nivedita. So that's it for the presentation. And let me just see all of you real quickly. Okay. Hello? Okay.
Yes, Mark.
Okay. So now we can take some questions, because this is nicer. Actually, when it's very difficult to talk just looking at a PowerPoint presentation. So we can take some questions too right now.
Swamiji, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, yes.
Okay, yeah, this is Chandan Chakraborty. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Swamiji, one of the slides, this is external nature and internal nature you talk about.
Yeah.
External, in a sense, we can see that, right? The outside nature.
Right.
And then we can feel it that the temptations are there. That's the relation between ourselves to the external nature and all that, right?
Yes.
Now the question is the internal nature. You have, the writing was you have to control internal nature and external nature both.
Yes.
So if we try to explore that, what is the internal nature? If we close our eyes and then try to think of it, the external nature, we open our eyes and then we at least can see, right?
Right.
Of course, different people see different things. Yes, that is true.
Yes.
But at least there is some commonness, right? There is some, at this frequency level, there is some commonness.
Yes.
But when we close our eyes and try to see the internal nature,
Yes.
and then the perception is very, very different. I mean, if you think, you think, and then you see things happening.
Right.
So there is kind of, something which is there. If it is there, then it's there. And then everybody should be able to see that, yes, that is there. That is applicable for the external nature.
Yes.
I see opening my eyes that a tree is there. Everybody sees the tree is there.
Yes.
But closing our eyes, I can see anything and you can see anything. So it
Right.
all depends on thought. So how we actually get to know more about internal nature and explore that and then use that actually in proper way.
That's a very good question. And that's actually what that's one of the things we're going to talk about, Swamiji talks about in Raja Yoga. And that is that actually most of our power of observation always goes towards the external nature, always goes towards nature itself. And very little of from birth, very little of our mental powers, our energy goes towards understanding what's inside of ourselves. which is this vast reservoir of samskaras, tendencies, both good and bad. And so what's within you, what's within me, what's within anybody else, that's all separate, that's all different. So that's actually one of the goals of Raja Yoga. Swamiji talks about that, how once we can, there's a technique for stilling the mind, and then once we can still the mind, just to first see what's there, to have what's called accurate self-assessment of ourselves. We don't know, we can only guess. We have many good things and many bad things, Swamiji says. Many, what you call samskaras, good samskaras, bad samskaras. But we sometimes don't even know what they are. They're lodged in the unconscious. So part of this, what we're going to do here in Raja Yoga, we're going to find out, he's going to give us techniques to help us understand what's inside, what's within us, and to identify that. And once we get that knowledge, it's in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, just to look at it without bias, without judgment. So this is there within me, these bad things are there, and these good things are there. To be aware of our thoughts. Then what's the second thing Swamiji says is to give emphasis, to give our prana to the good samskaras. This is what we call taking the path of least resistance. And this helps us, this is very necessary for our spiritual practice. Is that?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Yeah. So it is fine that whatever thoughts come to our mind and believe that yes, that's fine, and then promote that thought, and then go ahead in that direction, kind of things. Because as you told, the least resistance that has to be promoted, and then you go somewhere what your destination is.
But that takes actually, it's not so simple to get that. That's why the whole purpose of Raja Yoga. That's a very rare soul actually, and that's what we want to strive for. And that's called to know ourselves better.
Yeah.
Accurate self-assessment.
Yeah. Swamiji, just one more question.
Yeah.
Okay. See, you say that, of course, it's a general kind of thing that you believe in God, some kind of form and formless, right?
Yes.
And now all of us just travelers kind of thing. We see God in a picture, yes. And then we believe. See, when you say that you take a mixture of these and then go ahead. See, if you are Bhakta, yeah. Then the joy is pretty simple. You believe that Lord Krishna is there and He is there. And then you just dedicate yourself to Him, and then you get liberated. And then you don't have any other diversion kind of things. You are single-mindedness, you are one-pointed, you are focused, and then done. Now, if you're in the middle, you know that yes, He could be there. Oh no, I can't see, so He's not there. Then you move around and you try to get kind of Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Bhakti. You mix up everything, and then sometimes you think, well, I would like to go for the formless. Now, when you think of the formless, say you start going for the formless, at least with a little bit of Jnana, then nothing is there. Well, they're formless. Let us try to see what is there at the end. Formless. And then you would like to still look for something, and then probably no, there is nothing else. You sit down and then you just see your breathing, and then. And finally, my question is, when you look for formless, what is actually you look for?
When you look for formless, there's the process of stopping, looking at what is the formless. That's the eternal subject actually. So what we're trying to do actually, when looking for the formless, we're trying to, who is looking at the formless? Who is asking that question? You see those questions on those lectures on Vedanta. Who's asking that question? When you're looking at the formless, who is looking at the formless? Who is searching for the formless? So that question has to be answered. That question, who is the eternal subject? Who is the person asking the question? So that eternal subject, that Atman, as long as we're identified as a spiritual aspirant, as identified with the mind-body complex, our idea is to reduce our identifications with the mind, the body, the ego. And ultimately we come to the conclusion, we come to that state that who is it that's searching? Who is it that's seeking?
Okay. Thank you. Pranam Swamiji. Yeah, thank you.
Namaste. Okay.
Pranam Swamiji.
Namaste. Who's speaking? Please tell
My
me
name
your
is
name.
My name is Shomo.
Yes.
Thank you for your great talk. So, in your slides, you mentioned an expression called like psychic control.
Yes.
Yes, I didn't understand the meaning of that. If you can kindly a little bit elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think Swamiji, when he was talking about psychic, it's just another word for Raja Yoga. He talks about psychic control later on as one of a vibhuti in the Raja Yoga text. But in that psychic control, meaning some type of power of clairvoyance. But that's not how it's being used when we talked about by work or worship or psychic control. What he just basically meant is Raja Yoga. He was comparing that with Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and saying that that's just another word for Raja Yoga in that text.
Okay. Also, there is. I have another question. So basically, are the principles in each of these yogas overlapping? I mean, are the principles overlap in each of the 4 yogas?
What do you mean by what do you mean by that?
My confusion is that that Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. I mean, basically, if you do not have knowledge, then you cannot do work, and if you do more work, you create more knowledge. So basically, like these two things are kind of overlapping. So I could not understand that how are they separate? Like Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga, how are they separate? Because each are like fitting into each other.
Yes, and that's exactly right. I mean, when you talked about traditional, how it was practiced traditionally, that maybe Jnana Yoga, someone would be in the olden days, like just the rishis, that's all they did. Just, the entire day studying and engaged in Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. And Bhakti Yoga, the entire day they'll be engaged in rituals, worship. But for our purposes and intents, there is a lot of overlap. Even though philosophically, and we'll talk about this, there are differences. But ultimately, the goal, as Swami Vivekananda said, in any of these paths is self-abnegation, getting rid of the ego, merging that in either our Paramatman or in Saguna Brahman, in the Lord. That's the ultimate goal of all these things. And like you said, that's a good point. That's what Swamiji meant by the synthesis of all yogas. There is overlap in one sense.
Thank you.
Pranam Maharaj,
Namaste.
yeah, I was wondering, I am Mandal, NR Mandal, Shitranjan Mandal.
Namaste.
Namaskar, Maharaj. Yeah, one thing you told that Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, they are goal-oriented.
Yes.
I can understand. Well, I mean, the thought process I can understand. But here you are saying Raja Yoga and Karma Yoga process-oriented.
Yes.
So that Karma Yoga, I can partially understand that it can be defined as process-oriented. Now,
Right.
Raja Yoga, process-oriented, I do not have much idea about Raja Yoga, only I have heard about it. I mean, the translation, psychic control as given by Swamiji.
Right.
Often I think that there are certain, what to say, I mean, certain yoga practices also involved in this by any chance? It is said that this is not very recommended without any direct guidance of a guru to practice Raja Yoga, isn't it?
Yes, so correct.
Yes. I mean, what exactly process you mean?
Yes, that's a good question. I actually thought about that myself, because one of our senior monks had said it. So I was actually thinking about that for the past few days. And what is meant by that is because in the philosophy of Sankhya, as well as there's 6 philosophies in Indian philosophy.
Yes.
Asti, and was Sankhya Yoga. In Sankhya philosophy, the conception of God there, I believe, is God is like the position of Indra, Varuna, temporarily in charge of a cycle of creation. It's a temporary position.
Yes.
Now, in The yoga school, it's slightly different. It's the idea of a first teacher. So there's no actually Ishwara there like that, God, like we have in Bhakti Yoga or even in Advaita Vedanta, this Saguna Brahman, Krishna, that type of entity is not there in both of these. Just like in Karma Yoga, it's not necessary. You can have faith in God. It's not necessary in order to get the highest. If you can serve others without as God, it's not necessary to have faith in God. So I think in Raja Yoga, they mention in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender to Ishvara. So that's, you can have faith in God, but at the same time, what they're saying, you don't need faith in God. You can just through the process of concentration, you can achieve kaibalyam, or liberation, separation of Purusha from Prakriti. Is that clear? That it's not required. You can have, in other words, for Jnana, these can also be incorporated as a Jnana yogi or a Bhakti yogi in your practice of devotion or your practice of knowledge. But it's not necessary to have that. It's not necessary to have that believe in God in either Karma Yoga or Raja Yoga. You can, again, just practice to the mere practice of concentration. You can achieve the highest.
Yeah. Okay, Maharaj, somewhat getting, it will take time to get clear.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well, yeah, think about it and let me know.
Yes,
I'm also still...
yes, Maharaj.
Right.
Yes. But still, I think, from the other viewpoint of what you call Bhakta, Bhakta Marg, Bhakti Yoga becomes much easier to comprehend, and to practice probably in that sense. In that sense,
like Swami Vivekananda Swamiji would say that he gave this talk in the West, and somebody told him, Swamiji, I don't like that. I don't agree with that point. Then Swamiji would say, well, then that's not for you.
That's not for you. Yeah, exactly.
Then somebody else would say, but Swamiji, I like that point.
Yes.
And then Swamiji would say, well, then that's for you. So actually, like we said, it's like Swamiji gives us great freedom actually in that epigraph, that it's not one size fits all. So whatever works for you, that's great, and someone else will have a different set of inclinations.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Maharaj. Pranam, Maharaj.
Namaste. Okay. I think we have time for one last question. It's almost 8 o'clock.
There is a question in the chat box.
Okay. How do I pull up the chat box?
So, Gaurang Ruhela, he says, Pranam Swamiji, I am thankful for taking up this insightful subject again through this platform. Please put some more light on the divine potential everyone has, but unable to manifest due to different reasons.
Say that again. Please put more light on the divine potential everybody has,
but unable to manifest due to different reasons.
Right. That's a big topic, but let me I'll indirectly answer it by putting, because I thought a lot about that, this manifestation, and what I feel is actually, and this is very important, that why we are unable to manifest. That's a good question. And a lot of times why we're unable to manifest, and actually let me clarify my thoughts on this. You see, in Western society, and you see this in the West a lot, they talk about, I want to transform myself, I want to become something. Let me first address this point, then I'll answer this question. In the West, we talk about transformation. They don't believe in the West the idea of past samskaras. So what does that mean? You're trying to become something. It's not within you, it's outside of you, and you're trying to become that. Okay? And what Swamiji is saying is that everything is within us. It's not a question of acquiring something outside. It's just a question of what? Removing the veils, removing the ignorance. He even talked about this. Education is the manifestation of what? Perfection already in man. So all the things that we're after, actually they're already within us as it is. There's nothing to acquire from outside. It's only a question of manifesting the things. Now, what prevents us from manifesting these things, what they call in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, are our kleshas. We have complexes. Sri Ramakrishna talked about in the Kautamrita that if those who were shorol, very simple, udarmon, broad-minded, so for them it's easy to realize God. But for us, we're very complicated and we have many complexes. So it's actually these complexes that prevent us from realizing God, from making spiritual progress or progress in the world. So that's one of the things we're going to do in Raja Yoga. Try to understand through these processes what our own complexes are and deal with those things. This is the practical aspect of this class.
Swamiji, may I ask one more question, please?
Sure.
You know, see these 4 yogas, right?
Yeah.
More or less, we all do karma. We have to do karma. So to some extent, we understand that we have to do karma, but we should not be attached to that karma. Those things we have come across, we try.
Yeah.
Bhakti also we understand. You have to be something. You have to have that kind of emotion in you. Then only you have the eligibility to be a bhakta. To some extent, unless you have those, you don't have emotion inside. You can never be a bhakta, I feel.
Right.
My question is, out of these 4, when this to karma and bhakti, to some extent, we understand that we can ask ourselves and we can dissect ourselves. We can clearly try to know ourselves whether we can go to a bhakti marg or karma. Anyway, we have to do karma. See, without karma, we don't earn money and then we'll die. So karma anyway there. If some life we are blissful, then probably food is already arranged and also probably we will do only japa and get liberated. So that we have to wait for some other life, not in this life. My question is, when it comes to Jnana and Jnana Yoga and Raja Yoga, how do we know that whether we have the eligibility for Jnana Yoga or Raja Yoga? What is the question we should ask ourselves to check whether we do have that kind of eligibility?
Yeah, I think we talked about that. It's Sri Ramakrishna, what did, in the Kautamrita, what does he said? This Vyakulata, this yearning. That's the only requirement now in this present age. And he talks about that again and again. And there's no other requirements. And we see that when Swami Vivekananda went to the West, he, at that time, he was making so many disciples. And that's what they all looked for, just yearning to know, the yearning to want to know in whatever the path is. The Kathopanishad, Yameva Esha Vinute Tena Labhyaha, Tasyesha Atma Vivinute Tanum Swam. So he seeks the spirit, and then the soul reveals himself to he who seeks. So that's our only job, to constantly try to cultivate that idea of seeking. And we do that by developing both devotion as well as renunciation. It's a dual process. Thank you all so much. I think we've gone over the time.
Maharaj, why don't we end with that question, answering this question? What Sri Ramakrishna asked Master Mahasaya, that what do you think about me? Think of me. So what was Master Mahasaya's answers to that?
Oh, his answer was that God has made everybody else with a machine, but God has made you with his own hands.
Yes.
So that was the answer to that. So one of the last thing I want to say, so we'll put questions. So the next assignment will be to read the preface So please read it, and you can also, if there's, I don't know, Sujoy, is there a chat box there? Anything like that?
Here means in the Google Meet or in the email is Maharaj. If you send email to that group, everyone would get it.
Okay.
Whoever is subscribed to
Okay.
that email group.
So anyways, I'm going to put some questions again, and I like this, and I think that again, like I said, my brother did this. He has this Vedanta Life Academy, and many of our swamis. I don't know if you have not seen, you can see it. I think they're about to finish this session, but he's had many monks like Sarvat Priyananda, Atmarupananda, Dhyagananda Ji. They've given like 6-week courses, and there's always homework assignments to do the reading beforehand, and then questions to think about. And so that's what I'm aiming for in this class, is that the Shravana part should be done. And when we're discussing this, we go into Manana. So beforehand, please try to read the assignment and think about it. And then when we come, we can then try to take it to the next level. And I think next time, if everyone can show themselves, that would be nice. I see all the icons. So next time, please, everyone show themselves. That would also be nice. So.
Okay, Maharaj. Yes, sure.
Okay.
that will actually good. That will be good for all of us, I believe.
Yeah.
We get to see as if we are in the hall only. They are in IIT.
Okay. So Sujoy, should we end with a closing chant? Is that okay?
Sure, Maharaj. Thank you. Yeah.
Om Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pada Padme Tvayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhur